Welcome to Healing Wisdom, a Thursday morning talk show featuring guests sharing their stories and knowledge. We discuss the healing aspects of the arts, metaphysics, social justice, and adventure through all types of terrain. So join me, Pandora Peoples, here on WOMR 92.1 FM in Provincetown and WFMR 91.3 FM in Orleans. We're streaming worldwide at WOMR.org. My guest today is Cerridwen Fallingstar. She is an author, Wiccan priestess, a shamanic witch, and is the author of 3 historic novels and 2 memoirs. We previously spoke with her about Broth from the Cauldron, her first memoir, and today we're talking about her memoir, Rocket in My Pocket, Defying Gravity with Levity, from the frontiers of space to the frontiers of consciousness.
Thank you so much, Pandora. I'm so happy to be back with you again. It's so fun to see your beautiful smiling face.
Thank you.
And always good to pick your brain as well.
Yeah, so your book is full of so much vivid imagery, and that's just your style. You know, there's so many things that pop, like your dad painting a German family coat of arms on your plaid lunchbox, and your dad turning his VW Bug into a waltzing Matilda, the family's camping vehicle for vacations, and hoisting, a Pele offering from the edge of the volcano into the crater. Your lush descriptions of your backyard, and your real vivid memories of raising your children and your own childhood, and all sort of from chapter to chapter, we're going forward and going backward. Your mom, she was a school librarian and she dressed as like a punk rocker.
Yeah. For Halloween one year, yes.
So, and so much insight into people, I feel like just really sharing that levity and bringing joy into the trials and tribulations of everyday life, but just from a real, lighthearted, very big picture kind of place. Can you talk about what started you writing this particular story that really focuses on your father as a rocket scientist?
Right. In the 1960s, when I was growing up, my dad was a rocket scientist. And so I was being raised in that atmosphere of, the Cold War and people, fearing that we might have an atomic, nuclear warfare with Russia at any time. And there was this tremendous competition between the USSR and the United States at that time for the space race, which was sort of a cloaked competition that was also indicating who would be the most powerful militarily. And so they were trying to develop, rockets to the moon, but also military types of vehicles as well. My father was the one who developed that first big spy in the sky satellite that took big pictures of Soviet military installations. So that was a top secret thing he worked on at the time, in order to, again, help our government pull ahead during that competition. And my father would just be rolling over in his grave. I mean, he was what passed for a conservative Republican back then, but if he could see what, his beloved Republican Party, kissing Putin's ass, he would just, he must be rolling in his grave. I cannot imagine how desperately angry and upset he would be. I mean, he used to call people who are now the standard Republicans are the people he used to call, well, he would say, that guy is to the right of Genghis Khan. So it's like, yeah, he was conservative, but that guy was to the right of Genghis Khan. Well, now they're all to the right of Genghis Khan. And he would be pretty unhappy to see that.
It's interesting because you paint him as a heroic figure, but you also show his humanity and paint him in a very well-rounded way, I think.
Right. I think as you get older, is one of the good things about writing memoir as you get older is as you get older, you have so much more forgiveness for your family. Your heart just gets big enough to where you just embrace them as whole, flawed people. And you're not, when you're young, it's like, sometimes you have the anger which is fine. And it's important actually, because often young people need to move away from their families and go into a different level of consciousness. That's the rocket fuel that helps a young person pull away from, say, a dysfunctional pattern. So it's important. And yet, as you get older, there's more of this. Yeah, there's just a sense of forgiveness. You see the whole person. You just feel so much. I feel so much love for my family, everyone in my family at this point. I just feel this deep appreciation for all of them, and gratitude for everything they were able to give me, and a lot of forgiveness for what they couldn't. And it's nice to arrive at that place.
What are your beliefs about what happens on the other side? Like, do you feel that they are around or that they go to a higher consciousness or?
Yeah, I think, I believe in, I've had so many past life memories. My first three books are all past life historical novels. And and I started having vivid past life memories when I was a very small child. When I was, 3, I remember saying to my parents, "Oh, I'm so glad we're rich now." And they kind of laughed. They said, "Oh, honey, we're not rich." And I said, "Look, we have rug on the floor instead of dirt. We eat meat every day." And I went into the bathroom and turned on the hot water. Said, "Hot water whenever we want it. We're rich." Because I could remember walking a long way and pulling water up from a hole in the ground, and I could, which is not called a well, but I don't think I even knew that it was called a well. I just remember doing it and being cold and hungry. And now everything was just great as far as I could tell. I didn't remember having died in between. I didn't remember.
Mhm.
I wasn't aware that I was now a different person and it was a different life. But I had these strong memories, and we didn't have a television, so I couldn't have gotten it from TV. I certainly couldn't read, but those things were there. And I've certainly observed, say, with my own son, having past life memories at a very early age, also. And so it's a very common with children. And so I believe pretty strongly in that. I think there's hopefully you get a nice long rest period in between lives. Sometimes if you've had a rough one, you really need some time to recover and or you move on. I certainly get communication from the dead at various times, either through dreams or from trance work. I use a lot of hypnosis. I'm a hypnotherapist myself, but I had a hypnotherapist friend that I used to go to pretty regularly so that I could go hang out with my husband, who died, well, now it's 28 years ago. He died very young. And so it was important for me to be able to go and visit with him and feel like he was at least still there for me in spirit. So yeah, I believe that there's a rest period, and then you get to make some choices about what you want to do next.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I always feel like when I don't get a sixth sense about somebody being around, it's because they are they're long gone. I have my own family members that, they either went to a very, very different consciousness, or they were reincarnated. you know.
Yeah, right,
Um,
right. And sometimes, yeah, I think I don't know what people are doing. Like when my grandmother died, I was with her physically right there, and it was as if she had been shot from a bow. I mean,
mhm.
she was gone, like completely gone. And she was probably except for my husband, my closest person in the world. And I never heard from her. She didn't show up in trances. It was just wherever I don't know what she was up to, but she had somewhere to go, and she went. And then my father, who I had a much more problematic relationship with after he died, very quickly he started showing up in trances, wanting to help me, very much wanting to undo whatever harm he had done as my father, really
Mhm.
wanting to help me fix it. And he showed up all the time. So, and I thought, okay, this is not what if my brain was running the show, these things could be reversed. So something else is happening here. And it was continually
Yeah.
surprising to me what the communicate. And again, I get communications from the dead that are, again, it's not necessarily what I want to hear. So that makes me think, if my brain was running this show, we would be coming up with some different answers here. Uh, so I feel, and of course, I don't try and convince anyone else of this, but you're asking me, so I'm just telling you my honest impression. I just had a very interesting time this few days ago on Friday. I had what appears to have been a minor heart attack.
Oh.
And as I was in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, uh, the nitroglycerin started kicking in, and I was feeling much better, but I sort of drifted off for a bit, and then I was right close to the land of the dead, to the spirit world, and I could feel how warm and nurturing and yummy it was. And I was just like, oh boy, this would be nice. Yeah, it'd be nice to just go here. And then I thought about my son and my grandchildren would really prefer if I stuck around a little longer. I was like, okay, well, all right, I guess we'll try and stick around a little longer. But it was certainly not even vaguely frightening. It was really quite, I know people keep saying, oh, this must have been so scary. I was like, no, It was excruciatingly painful for a while, but it wasn't scary. Um, so yeah, that's my impression, is that it's actually pretty warm and friendly on the other side, and I look forward to it. But I am willing to stick around a little longer. My grandchildren are just about to turn 8, so it'd be nice if I had another 10 years. I think
that sounds like a really good plan. Absolutely. Yeah. In one part of the story, I think it's actually the last chapter, you say you had this experience where in 2018, was it? There was a false alarm during the first Trump administration.
Yes.
There was missiles on their way from North Korea.
Missiles on the way for North Korea to Hawaii. It came through on our phones. Everybody in Hawaii got this message on their phones that there were missiles coming from North Korea and we should take shelter immediately. And I was like, whoa, great. This is, Trump and Kim Jong-un have decided to, piss each other off, and,
this is the result. Yeah.
Knows why they're bombing Hawaii, but that's what they're doing. And I'm here. And yeah, so then I kind of started, just like for earthquake, because I live in California, we think about earthquakes all the time. So I said, okay, well, I'll fill up the tub with water and, get some food in the bathroom. That was the only room with no windows. So I didn't want the windows shattering in on me. So I was like, okay, well, this will be the safest room in the house. We'll try and make it there. And then I called my son to say goodbye, because I figured, well, maybe I survived this thing, maybe not, we'll see. And he was, of course, saying, Mom, it can't be real. And I was like, well, it looks really official, honey. I'm sorry. looks pretty rough here. And, but finally he found out that it was indeed a mistaken message. And then immediately it popped up on my phone that it was a mistake. This was took them 45 minutes. And people in Honolulu were really panicked because they assumed that would be bombed for sure. And people were literally taking manhole covers off and jumping down into the sewers in order to try and be more safe from the blast. I mean, it was, and people were going, tons of people showed up having heart attacks there at the hospitals. I mean, it harmed a lot of people. This error did harm a lot of people. It caused a lot of chaos. People were picking up their children and throwing them down into the sewers or anywhere underground where they thought they would be safer. I mean, people were quite terrorized. So.
Well, first of all, I just like to say that folks should read it because it's funny and it's a pleasure. So Rocket in My Pocket, again, it's Defying Gravity with Levity, from the frontiers of space to the frontiers of consciousness. You're listening to Healing Wisdom, and we are speaking with Cerridwen Fallingstar. She is a priestess, shamanic witch, and author of 5 books. In this latest memoir, Rocket in My Pocket, Cerridwen, you talk about when you found out you were pregnant for the first time, which was very unexpected.
I'd been diagnosed as being sterile by several different doctors. And so the pregnancy came as quite the little shock. And Eli was saying, well, we've got to think about this. I mean, this is just, we should be in better financial shape and all that. But for me, I had, we went to, do a ultrasound, and the baby was, perfectly positioned, and I fell in love instantaneously. So there was absolutely no possibility of having an abortion. I just wasn't, it would have been completely impossible for me. Yeah, when I was pregnant with my son, and things were difficult between me and my husband for a couple of weeks, when he was upset that I seemed to have made a unilateral decision, which was true, that I simply wasn't going to consider an abortion. It just wasn't going to happen. And so he felt a little railroaded into the situation. But then he got on board 100% and was a fantastic father, but just took him a little while. That's understandable. But I, talked to my mother from a distance, by phone while we were in Hawaii, and called home. And I told her we decided to keep the baby. And she was like, oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And I said, oh, Mom, I'm terrified. And she says, oh, of course you're terrified. I was terrified with you. And she paused for me. She says, actually, you still terrify me. And I was like, oh, okay, well, if that's the norm, then I'll just embrace the terror and move forward. I was afraid that it meant that I would be a bad mother, that I was so scared of it. So to find out that fear was the natural response was, oh, okay. In that case, it's not so bad. And,
Right, because doctors had said that you would have like an ectopic
they would
pregnancy.
be ectopic because I had all this scar tissue from having the Dalkin shield, which was a bad IUD design that actually killed and sterilized a whole lot of women in my age range before they took it off the market. As usual, they kept it on the market knowing that women were dying because they were still making money. That's our medical system for you. It is all about the money. So anyway, because of that scar tissue from that, they didn't think I was going to be able to conceive.
Yeah.
My son had a healthy disrespect for medical authority, and so he came in anyway.
Yeah, and it was really beautiful to hear how you were so sure, just instinctually that this is what you wanted. Like, I think it bypassed even all the logic, right?
Oh, completely. I saw that little heart beating in the center of my uterus, and I fell in love, just overwhelmingly, instantaneously. I was just completely in love, and that was it. I'm completely in love to this day. My son is now 42, and never altered for a second. It's always been there. So I was very lucky that way, because I know not everybody bonds easily, with their kids. Sometimes it's a lot of work, but I just was very easy that for me, my instincts are pretty overpowering.
And like as a fellow leader of full moon ceremonies, new moon ceremonies, and women's groups and ritual, a really important piece, like you're saying, the energy moves through you when you're lighthearted, but also it's like that sort of zooming out and getting that higher vibration of the bigger picture, and seeing, sort of like, oh, what fools these mortals be. Like you can channel this kind of like puckish energy of this like sense of humor about everything, the divine comedy, and then you kind of go in and then you can really feel your feels, but it's this sort of play of that. And I think that whenever we get these, like a lot of the messages that people receive in ceremony, like from their ancestors or from someone who's passed on, a lot of times, or from their higher self, it's often very playful.
After my husband died, the first dream I had about him, which was probably only a week or so later, he appeared in my dream, and he said, "Don't you find it amusing that I'm more spiritual than you now?" I was like, "Oh yeah, this is a barrel of laughs." I was kind of outraged. I was like, "No, it's not amusing." Right away, he's joking about it. And I'm like, "Oh."
Totally. When you talk about your precognition, you get this through dreams, right?
Intuition or whatever. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. For example, in Saudi Arabia, where your parents were both in the car accident and your father passed, you talk about like having had a feeling that was really strong. Your mother acknowledges it. And it's interesting to see how even from her sort of Christian to agnostic background, over time, she sort of accepted.
Yeah, she totally, accepted my psychic abilities, because she kept seeing it. I mean, it kept happening. She's agnostic. That means she's observing what's happening, and she can see it. I mean, she started to, a cousin of hers did a genealogy, and it went back to a character who was called Michael the Wizard back in the 1100s, who apparently had a reputation for calling down lightnings on his enemies' castles. And she points to this and she's, "There it is, the bad genes." And I was like, "Yep, there it is, Mom." It's like, genealogy is destiny. We can't help it.
And then she also sort of blamed you for being alive because you were praying for her. But
right. When she survived the car accident, she was trying to say it was all my fault because me and my fellow witches had been doing spells to save her life. I did point out that she also worked in a Catholic school, and all the nuns were praying for her, and that her best friend was Mormon, and all the Mormons were praying for her, and it was not just my fault. So eventually she stopped being angry at me for having witched her back from the edge.
She was like, "Oh, I'm a social butterfly." And you're like, "You're a butterfly with the wingspan of a condor."
My father would always say that he married up and that my mother was more brilliant than he was. Which was probably true, but he would acknowledge it. Both he and his father would also say he had married up and had married a woman more, and they would brag about that to anyone who would listen. And my husband liked being with a smart girl too. So imagine my shock to find out that most men don't want to be with a brilliant woman. I was like, damn, I thought this was like a plus. I didn't realize that socially it was going to be a minus. But yeah, I was lucky enough to grow up in a family where smart women were valued.
And you guys really got into nature. So like, do you want to share a little bit about that? It sounds like that's been a big part of your journey. And
I'm very fortunate that, again, I feel very fortunate that my parents were agnostic and that we went camping back in the old days where the only people out there in the woods were people who actually wanted to be there. Nobody was there with their televisions or their cell phones, or people were there in nature. You would often talk to the other people in the campground, sit around a fire with them, share some food, stories. It was quite charming. And my dad used to say, we'd be out there and he'd say, why would anyone go to church when you could go be with the trees? And I would think, yeah, I totally agree with that. And when we moved to upstate New York, again, this was because he was doing this top secret thing that he was working with Eastman Kodak to make the big Spy in the Sky satellite. They needed to make super-sized lenses to take the pictures they wanted to take. But of course, I didn't know that at the time because it was top secret. But so to me, it was just my parents just took me to this place to torture me. I didn't want to be in upstate New York, and I couldn't imagine why the hell we were there. And the kids started coming up to me saying, oh, what church does your family go to? And I was like, church? What kind of teenagers care about church? I was like, what's happening here? I'm from Southern California. This is not compute at all. So I went home and said, kids want to know what church we go to. My father said, tell them we're pagans, honey. Tell them we worship the trees. And I was like, oh, that's going to go over really well. But later on, I was like, yeah, I decided to worship the trees. The apple did not fall as far from the tree as they might like to have thought it did.
yeah, no, certainly not. Wow, that's amazing. That's really neat.
Yeah, for the 1960s, it was pretty cool.
As a grandmother, what wisdom can you give for women who want to share their more spiritual side as grandparents?
Well, it's the kids are completely open to it. Like we did a Samhain ritual together and had pictures of their grandfather Eli, who they hadn't met, and some of their other ancestors, and wow, they just loved it. They were very solemn and very paying very close attention, and the kids are naturally spiritual, and they're going to want to, they definitely ask me questions about, well, you're a real witch, right? Okay, well, so, but they have that, when they were about 4, I walked outside and one of them had a big bowl of water to which she had added a bunch of plants that she had pulled up from the garden, and she's stirring it, and she looks up brightly at me when I walk out. She's, it's been so long since I made a potion.
That's awesome.
I was like, yeah, years and years, I imagine. It's cool. That same one, when she was only 2, walked up to me, looked me dead in the eyes, and she said, I know you from before.
Ooh.
I was kind of startled. I don't usually talk about reincarnation with the kids, but I kind of blurted out, you mean from another life? And she's like, yes. And then the moment was over and she went back to being a little kid.
Right.
Okay, well then, we'll see how this evolves. That's going to be.
Wow, that is so cool. That is so cool. So can you share like one of your takeaways from the years that you've done ceremony, especially in this era?
Oh yeah. I just did with some of my friends. We did a political ritual, and the chant was a variation on an old whaling chant. We were going, way hey up she rises, way hey up she rises, way hey up she rises, liberty and justice. And then we would go on to sing, what do you do with a power mad despot? What do you do with a power mad despot? What do you do with a power mad despot? Liberty and justice. Bury him so deep they'll never find him. Bury him so deep they'll never find him. Bury him so deep they'll never find him. Liberty and justice. So feel free to use this chant.
I went. Well, that's
bring in humor to your magical workings too, because it'll definitely energy, and it'll be good. So we had a great time with that. We just did lots of focusing on liberty and justice, prevailing over all this crazy attempted fascist takeover.
Right. Yeah, I see the activism and the protests happening all over the world, and I think there is power in these expressions because Well, for a lot of reasons, speaking out and not being afraid to speak out, but also the ceremony of it, the togetherness of it is powerful.
Yeah, I've been protesting outside the Tesla places, and in San Francisco, we had a big New Orleans style brass band was playing music. It was like a street party. Make it fun, have a good time, go out and I really want to ask the young people. If there's any young people listening, look, us old people, we can't run fast from the police anymore. You've got to be. We're trying to clump away from them on our walkers. Come on, it's time for you to step up to the plate. It's not enough to do whatever you're doing online. Fine to be online sometimes, but don't live your life there. This is like people are trapped in the matrix. We had a whole movie about that. It's stuck in the matrix. Pull yourself out, send letters, and and make phone calls and do the work. We have to do the work. And it has to be a lot of us. Think about, this is a big country. Like, think about how much bigger this country is than Germany. There are 300 million people in this country. It is going to be very hard for them to take over and control 300 million people spread out over the size of this country. So don't be so discouraged and afraid. There are a lot more of us than there are of them. And we just have to have a large enough proportion standing up. When our generation stood up against the draft, that became a third rail of politics, and they still haven't reinstated it. We made progress, with getting women abortion. Okay, those rights are being lost in some places now. Keep fighting. They don't stop fighting. We can't stop either. It would be nice. Believe me, I wanted all my political work to make it so all you young people had wonderful lives and you didn't have to do any of this. And I totally wanted that for you, but it's not being that way. And so, these younger generations, you got to do your part. It's time. We're passing you the baton, and you got to go run with it now. We cannot do it. My generation can't keep shouldering it. We're old and creaky.
Yeah. Oh, well said and point taken. Absolutely. It is time. It is time to speak out. The time is now.
Musk and his buddies were in the Treasury, rattling around. I called the FBI and told them, I said, so here's the names of all the people that I've heard about. They're in the Treasury right now. If you go arrest them right now, they're physically there. There's a crime in progress. I'm reporting a crime in progress. And they very dutifully took notes. And finally, towards the end, he was like, so did anyone ask you to call? I was like, yes, the Washington, D.C. police. I called them first. And they said, it's a federal matter. You need to call the FBI. He was a little discouraged at that. He was like, "Oh, great! They're passing the buck to us." I mean, do what you can. Don't hesitate. Pick up the phone. I've been calling Republicans too and telling them, Republican legislators, saying, "Hey, my family has been Republican since the Civil War. That's true. I don't quite mention that I'm not anymore, but I say, hey, my family has been Republican since the Civil War. We are patriots. I am hoping you're a patriot too, because at this point, it's not about Democrats and Republicans. It's about patriots and traitors. I hope you're a patriot and you will fight to protect our democracy."
We've been speaking with author Cerridwen Fallingstar. Her new book, Rocket in My Pocket, is out now. You've been listening to Healing Wisdom at Outermost Radio. All of our shows are podcasts at WOMR.org. Also check out healingwisdomradioshow.com and contact me at Pandora@WOMR.org.